and WNST.net. So good to be back in after a week off last week. Happy that you're joining us. If you haven't found us out on the internet, we are streaming live now on our YouTube WNSTV channel as well as on Facebook Live from time to time. You can always email me, nasty@WNST.net, and find us. I'm doing a little NHL, I'm doing a little NBA, and certainly the Baltimore Orioles entertaining not just the Red Sox, but then the Yankees this weekend. Got a guy here who knows a little bit about both of those things. He covers the Red Sox as the new beat writer there at the Boston Herald. He was around the Houston Astros, but has been around baseball for a number of years. He is Evan Drellich, one of our defending champions here, and you can find him out on Twitter at Evan Drellich. That's Drellich. By the way, Evan, I love the little cartoon of you with the I Love New York shirt, and it's sort of like anywhere baseball is, you'll go and follow it and cover it, right, man?
The credit for that goes to the Houston Chronicle's illustrator, Ken Ellis, who very kindly, when I left the newspaper, decided to do that mock-up. And that's something that people do in journalism, right? They'll make you a back page or a front page or, in this case, an exaggerated cartoon of myself. So
I've had two as well.
Neat.
I left two newspapers in the 80s. Mike Rosigliano, the Baseball Weekly in the Baltimore Sun, he does the same thing. But, I mean, there's nothing like seeing yourself caricatured, right?
Yeah, particularly when you're as narcissistic as I am. It's really a thrill at that point.
Well, you've shared it on Twitter, and now we all get to share it as well. Hey, man, you're sharing a decent season here, right? You came in from Houston to Boston. I know we've talked about the Astros a lot this year and where they are. We saw them last week, sort of clean the clocks of the Orioles and certainly striking a lot of those guys out. But being around the Red Sox, and seeing the energy they've brought the town with the fan base at first place. I mean, hell, they're always in either first place or last place, right? You've picked a good year to jump on this bandwagon and cover this team. A lot of young stars. This is a really exciting brand of the Red Sox, I think, this year.
Yeah, and nobody quite saw this coming. I don't think anybody predicted Jackie Bradley Jr. would be hitting this well. I don't think anybody thought that Xander Bogaerts would legitimize a conversation about which one would you rather have, Mookie Betts or Xander Bogaerts. I think that's an argument now that going into the season you couldn't have, but becomes much more interesting, at least if you're a Red Sox fan. Look at what Stephen Wright has done. I've seen plenty of knuckleballers. I haven't seen a knuckleball move the way his does. And you have a lot of these different elements going right, and that's what you need to have a winning season. That's what they had in 2013. You had a bunch of free agents that happened to play well at the same time, and that's exactly what they didn't have the last 2 years when I wasn't covering the team. So, watching them night in, night out, the offense does feel like a machine, and the numbers show it is. It's been the best offense in the majors. They'll dip at some point, and then the question is, does the starting pitching have enough, or do they go out and add to that starting pitching?
Well, you say they'll dip a little bit, but I mean, Betts is not having his best year. Ramirez might still have more in the tank, but I don't know that you can get more out of Ortiz than you're getting right now, and I don't know that you ever really begin a year, any of these years, the last 5 years, feeling like you're going to see this 28-year-old version of David Ortiz. And, of course, when it comes to Baltimore, all of my Oriole fans are putting up the S word on their Facebook and, whispering. And I think anybody that has this kind of production is going to deal with that. But this has been a tremendous, if it is his final year thus far for David Ortiz. He is not just a factor. He is the factor for that team.
Yeah. Going into Monday, you could look at a variety of numbers. He was the single best offensive player in baseball. Obviously, he's a DH. You discount something if you're talking about overall player. But nobody has been a better hitter than David Ortiz to start this year. And that's using advanced metrics. That's using basic numbers. You can look at the exit velocity. Nobody had hit more balls over 100 miles per hour off the bat than he had. And it's incredible at 40 years old that he's doing it. He talked about, everybody's asking, is he really going to retire? And what he said, I sat down with him a couple weeks ago and asked him if he really thought about this, if he was performing well, how he would feel walking away. And the answer is kind of obvious. He expected to perform well. He expected everybody would be asking him these questions. Now, I don't think anybody could have expected him to be the best, but he expected to be among the best, and he has been for the last several years after he had that Achilles scare, and he's still got to manage his heels, and that's why you see him take a couple of days off. But with all the remarkable things going on, he might be the most remarkable. And that's what's kind of amazing about watching the Red Sox, is there's so many different things contributing right now, and that's why they're they're blowing people away offensively.
Yeah, I told the story earlier, and for those of you that get around David Ortiz, I famously had my press pass taken away 10 years ago by Angelos. I don't know most of these guys anymore. Some days it makes it easier to do my job. Some days it makes it harder to do my job, but I don't have to deal with any of the BS anymore of being, intimidated by Orioles PR staff and all that other nonsense. But I don't get to know these guys, and last year I did my baseball tour kind of famously, and you and I have talked about that. David Ortiz is one of two players, literally, that I spoke to. Actually, three, if you consider John Lester, because we had lunch with him in St. Louis. But I didn't talk to many of these guys, and Ortiz was one of the guys that when I talked to him, he really was a joy, and I only know him from afar and from bats and dugouts and, hitting dramatic home runs and, the F-bombs at the Boston, strong and all of that stuff and winning championships. But there's something there that I see from afar now that I really admire, which is the pride to go out and do this at this point when you've made this money and you've been decorated and you don't really have to do it anymore, but to do it at that level, I don't think anyone can appreciate how tough that is to do. I've become a fan of David Ortiz through all of this.
Yeah, he's very easy to root for. The charisma that I think people see from afar is the same charisma he brings in the clubhouse. He really is always smiling. He's always cracking a joke. Even yesterday, I asked him, a couple days ago, I asked him, well, how did you hit that home run? He was battling a foot thing. And he said to me, well, I don't hit with my feet. I hit with my hands. He laughed and walked away and he said, see you later, buddy. I mean, he's always very genial. And I think in terms of outsized personalities in baseball, that will be a loss. You don't have people of that kind of character often.
Well,
right?
dude, you've been around this a long time. It's hard to have a sense of humor and be a Red Sox. You know what I mean? It just is. I think it's certainly over the last 20 years, maybe a Yankee. But in Boston, that's a fishbowl there that not everybody has swam so politely or well in. And it can make you jaded and screw the media and screw the fans and I just play for the money. He sort of changed that in an environment, given the color of his skin, given the history there, given the Latin nature, given the fact that they never won before he was there, and they've still won now that all the Schillings and all the other guys are gone. He's still there, and they might win the World Series again this year.
Yeah, and he's had his run-ins. There was a couple years back, Dan Shaughnessy, the Globe, wrote that story about, well, is he on PEDs? Kind of a speculative piece, just wondering, if many fans, as you alluded to, do wonder. And David certainly has had his moments where he goes on tirades. He burst into Terry Francone's press conference at one point. But overall, you're right. This is somebody who, through all the, let's face it, the BS that can go on when you're playing in Boston or one of those major markets like New York, he's kind of kept a smile throughout it. And he's comfortable being introspective with the media, opening up and talking about things. We talked recently about his fear that his Achilles was going to snap and how what he called it was warrior time 3 years ago in 2013. He really felt like he had to kind of put that fear behind him and just go out there and do it. And he's done it, and he's open to talking about it. I think that's really where you see guys just can't quite handle it. And we're going to continue to see that happen in Boston. And that's where he's exceptional.
Evan Drellich covering all things Red Sox now at the Boston Herald. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Evan Drellich. That's Drellich. Let's talk about these young guys. Let's talk about Bogaerts. Let's talk about Jackie Bradley. I know we talked a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be talking again because we play each other sort of staggered throughout the year here. But these are the two guys that, Ortiz we're not shocked by, maybe a little bit mildly because of his age, but these young guys were something that the Red Sox had always sort of counted on to the point of last place last year, and 3 years ago, they've now been rewarded for their patience, and these guys are working out all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's kind of a classic tale, right? We all the time hear about the up-and-coming player, they are the hot prospect, and then, some of them live up, and then some of them just don't. And in the case of Bogaerts and Betts, you have both of them coming into their own at the same time. And really, and you have to put Bradley in there. With Bradley, he was a high draft pick. He was a very talented guy. He hit well in the minors. It was when he got to the big leagues that he struggled, and everybody all of a sudden billed him as this defensive-only center fielder, wondered if he'd finally be able to come out of it. And he has, in a way that is more dramatic than you see most guys do it, right? It's not usually a 29-game hit streak that springboards you and kind of says, okay, this guy has arrived. But it's come all at once for him, and it's in pitch selection. If you just look at his numbers against different pitches, and that's readily available, you can go to brooksbaseball.net, different places. He couldn't handle breaking balls. He couldn't handle off-speed pitches. And through the work he's done with Chili Davis, the hitting coach, he's been able to identify what pitches he wants to go after better. And that's part of the maturation process in baseball, and it happens at different ages for different people.
Oh, it happens for everybody, right? Even the guys that are successful, you get to the big leagues, we hear Buck talk about it all. There's a huge difference, and it's obvious, and it's always about the curveball and the speed, right? And the bigger stadiums and the bigger decks and the bigger stakes and all of it.
Yeah, and the constant adjustments. But even look at Bogaerts. Last year, the talk was around Correa and Lindor. Granted, they were technically rookies, so you would hear that. And Bogaerts was in the mix. But I think what we're seeing now is if it's possible that a Red Sox prospect could actually have been underappreciated, I think Bogaerts might be. Because from afar, and I seen him in 2013, he was a good player. He was a good prospect. A hit streak himself in recent times. So we're kind of seeing them at their peak and at their ceiling, and that's why I say that I do think there will be some sort of drop-off for some of these guys at least. And you're right, there could be some people who in turn pick it up. But this is a Bogaerts that we hadn't quite seen before. Although, if you go back to basically been the best hitter.
A whole lot of money. And Ramirez now is sort of settled in, and that's especially as everybody around him has started to hit a little bit.
Yeah, Sandoval's out of sight, out of mind, and that's where they need him. He'll come back next year, hopefully healthy if you're the Red Sox. Hope the shoulder will be in better shape, and hopefully he himself will be in better shape, and you'll see what you can get out of it. Maybe eventually you can trade him, and you have to eat some of that money, and that's just what you do. It's buried and out of the way for now, and that they do have a good third baseman in Travis Shaw, that Hanley is working out well enough at first base. There was a game in Toronto recently where Hanley couldn't handle a throw at first base that would have been the final out of an inning instead of let the winning run. But he has transitioned well. He's a former shortstop. I think that's a reasonable thing to expect that the guy could handle first base. I mean, he's much happier than he was last year from all accounts. I didn't see him last year. It's kind of hard to believe some of the things you hear, but it seems to be that he really was just an awful outfielder. But he's turned the corner, and the future for Sandoval, it's a spring training storyline next year, but it does lurk in the background of well, that's a mistake, and maybe Rusney Castillo proves to be a mistake. He's that outfielder that they still have at AAA, and there have been some missteps, and for those missteps, they've also had some things work out really well.
Well, it'll all be judged on the first picture down in Fort Myers, right?
Right, exactly. But out from under the shirt or not?
Probably the angle, right?
Yeah, and hopefully for him, look. There's a possibility here the guy's got a serious eating problem, and that's what his former trainer, when he was with the Giants, when he actually did well, described to me as somebody who's really, he gained weight very rapidly, a normal thing by the sound of it, by the account that was given to me. And it sounds like, and what his former trainer explained, is that it's something that needs monitoring, and hopefully, if that is the case, that the Red Sox follow kind of some sort of procedure like that, where they really are keeping close tabs on the guy, because there is a good baseball player in there if he's disciplined.
Evan Drellich joining us here from...
See the pitch to Chris Davis?
It was insane.
The one that literally changed directions in midair. It's wiffle ball. I mean, I wrote it that way because there's no other way to write it. It's the kind of thing that throws you back to the middle school courtyard, where you're playing with your buddies and you're making that thing spin in 12 different directions at once. There's a joy to watching a knuckleball. I don't too often like to kind of wax poetic on baseball. I think there's enough of that, when the occasion calls for it. I think watching Stephen Wright's knuckleball really, though, is a unique thing, because every pitch is different. That's the nature of the knuckleball. But as I said earlier, it moves differently. It moves more with a greater sharpness than. He had a neck problem, right? He was one of the Red Sox. He got removed in the fourth inning with dizziness. And this was due to some sort of neck condition he has going on. But at the time, he had 4 pass balls through 4 innings catching Stephen Wright. So it's like, yeah, well, he got removed with dizziness. It's not the kind of thing to make fun of, but he got removed with dizziness, and he got removed with an inability to catch the knuckleball. He needed a bigger mitt, right? That was the assumption at the moment they took him out, because it's you can't track it, and it's a great find for the Red Sox, and I think he is really. Look, everybody's a key. Everybody's an X factor. But when you look going forward, the offense is going to have ups and downs, but it's clearly a playoff contending offense, right? At this point in the year, there's no doubt about that. When you have the best offense on Memorial Day and beyond, that you're beyond a point of questioning. Well,
yeah, when you're hitting 300 as a team, it's sort of insane in June, right? Literally.
Yeah, they fall back. This is a playoff offense. At this point, that's not going to change. What's going to matter is whether the Stephen Wrights, whether the Eddie Rodriguez's, whether the starting pitching, and also the bullpen is there to carry them through the down points when they aren't scoring 7 runs a game like they've been doing nearly every night. It's incredible how consistent the offense has been.
Well, I mean, it's going to come down to pitching, and I guess that brings us to the Orioles here and your next pass-through with the Orioles. I think the thing we're going to see with the Yankees in the bullpen as it goes on, and the Orioles will see them this weekend, the backside of that bullpen in New York is filthy, and that's going to start to add up, and as their bats sort of awaken. It's going to be a long summer. I'm convinced the Red Sox are going to stay in this thing. I'm not convinced the Orioles are going to stay in this thing because I'm really never convinced about Ardo sort of kind of not show up yet. It's a nervous time around here from a pitching standpoint.
Yeah, my feeling going in, I think we talked about this the last time we talked, was that having seen the Blue Jays recently, look, they gave the Red Sox a hard time. I think the Orioles will continue to give the Red Sox a hard time. When you have an offense like that, the pitching's got to be really bad for you not to at least hang around. And even through, from afar, I've been impressed throughout the Red Sox success recently that every time I looked at the standings, either the Orioles were still a game or two ahead or a game or two behind, right? It was never as though as the Red Sox were pulled away, which I think is a testament to how well the Orioles can play, right? And those issues are there. You're right about the pitching. The Yankees, look, they could end up selling at some point. I was at the owners' meetings in New York, and Hal Steinbrenner stood there for 15 minutes outside of 245 Park Avenue, which is where the commissioner's office is, answering questions about whether this team is going to go into a rebuild or not. So it's really interesting to see whether they sell. It's
and who's buying at that point, right? I mean, and who's giving up the prospects? Because certainly that's something that's lacking there at this point.
Yeah, they need to retool. What the Yankees have done kind of impressively, I think quietly, is actually rebuild without rebuilding in the sense of they haven't had disastrous seasons, but they have been able to stock the farm system to some degree, right? They have added some prospects, and I think it's the hardest task for any executive to do. To in this collective bargaining agreement, if you want to get really nerdy with it, it's very hard to add talent without losing, right? To get the high draft picks, the draft money, the international draft, the international signing money. To lose, might not want to admit it, but that's the way it works right now. So to be able to kind of restock your system without it, the Yankees are believers and get some talent back, and then pretty quickly you turn around. Parity is real. Hal Steinbrenner, the owner's talking about this. Those are his words. He said, parity's here to stay. And he almost sounded a little, not depressed, but, there was a time when the financial might of these more structured, and that's benefited baseball as a whole, but it's kind of taken away the...
Since you went on the beat, are you convinced the Red Sox...
I think Rodriguez back is going to be big. I think Borowski, who is going to be very aggressive. They got an ownership that wants to win, that after 2 years of miserable losing and high expectations, I don't see them being wimpy at the really going to make a push wherever they need to, which will prove to be the bullpen with Carson Smith being out for the year. The offense, I wrote in April that this looked like a mediocre team, and they did. They had all the signs of a mediocre team, and I'd watched a mediocre team in Houston in 2014, and even the 2015 team made the playoffs, but there was a time there where they were basically a 500 team. And that team, since the season's kind of rolled on and progressed,
Cross a few times this summer. Always great to have you on, Evan. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks so much, Nestor.
You got it. Evan Drellich covers all things Red Sox for the Boston Herald. You can follow him at Boston LICH. You can find me out on the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world by 7 a.m. Our morning newspaper up at WNST.net. It is all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but least, the tech service is the best way to get breaking news. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You can sign up at WNST.net. Anywhere in the world, you'll get it first. And if they ditch Ubaldo Jimenez, you'll know first. And, of course, our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, all rocking, including our YouTube WNSTV channel, now up and running in the live stream format. We're also throwing some archive stuff in there as well as on Facebook Live. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.